Welcome to the Foundation Series, your deep dive into startup compensation with industry leaders from across the startup world. Join me, Matt McFarlane, a people operations leader turned compensation specialist, as we uncover the strategies and practices driving success in tech startups around the world. Hear insights from heads of people, founders, and experts as we explore how to build robust compensation frameworks that not only fuel growth and retention, but do so in the dynamic startup environment that we all know and love. Let's get into it. All right, so in today's episode, it's all about talking about getting your first compensation cycle right as a startup. So I know in our previous episode, we talked about it's never too early to get your compensation philosophy in place, or your first compensation philosophy. You know, what's your mentality? What's your thought process when it comes to the first compensation cycle? Similar, different? How do you sort of tackle it from an early stage head of people position?
Yeah, well, look, I do not envy anyone in that position. It's really hard. You're going to need help. You're going to need a support structure. So, find your support team quickly and lean on them. But yeah, I think lots of things to bear in mind. The most important being, again, start early and keep it simple for now, and document everything. But we can go through like a little bit of a roadmap of, what to bear in mind and when, and take it from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. Talk me through what you think are some of the key steps, the key milestones when it comes to thinking through what that first compensation philosophy, or rather the compensation cycle, can look like.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's assume you've got the comp philosophy, agreed, signed off by everyone, everybody loves it. But it's there, it's been documented, everyone's on board. So now we're talking about, really sort of nailing the comp cycle and getting it from start to finish. So where the start is, assessing where people are right now, and the finish is, folks get paid their new compensation at the end of whichever month this project finishes. Cool. So to start, for sure you need to make sure that the scaffolding that we mentioned earlier, so that people's HR data is correct, in the correct system, cleaned, and, all reads in the same way. You've accounted for currency changes, make sure that you've cleaned the data and it's all, it's all in one spot. It's all understandable. If you pulled a report, anybody would be able to immediately see like for like and understand, what you're comparing with what. So you should have, obviously, departments, teams within departments, hopefully employee levels within their team framework, have that all sort of in one spot, ready to go. Assuming that's all in a good spot, and assuming that employees have been correctly mapped to their level, and there's an understanding amongst managers and a calibration that's happened that means that a P3 software engineer is comparable to a P3 marketing person, or whatever that might be, then you're already in a great spot. Now, assuming you have a good data source, hopefully the data source will be able to tell you, what you should be paying all these folks in their different job families and if in their different levels. And hopefully for each role, for each role and for each level within the role, you'll have identified the salary range that you'd like to offer. So if your midpoint is, say, the target midpoint is, say, the 60th, and you'll allow a plus minus, 15% from the midpoint either way. So that will hopefully have been crystallized in your comp philosophy, but you should be able to have that sort of really clearly outlined. depending on what the philosophy is, so let's assume, you've decided to go for a pay for performance philosophy, then it might be the case that you have a merit matrix. So depending on how folks have scored in their performance reviews, it might be that someone who's greatly exceeding expectations will get a blanket, 10% increase. Or it may be that depending on where they sit in the salary range, so if they are below the midpoint but are greatly exceeding, then they actually get a bump to take them higher than the 10% greatly exceeds. So
kind of coming up with a set of rules for like a few different criteria that you might see in your data set.
Exactly. So it might be the case that you want to go off of the current compa ratios. So if someone is low within the band but is performing really well, then they will get an increased multiplier to move them quickly up the band. Conversely, if someone who's already really high in the band is also greatly exceeding, then it might be the case that they get a little bit of a smaller increase so that they don't sort of move out of the band, at breakneck speed. Now, that might not work with your comp philosophy. You might be like, hey, actually, I don't want there to be an upper limit on my band. I'm totally okay with breaking the band. That's totally fine as long as it's in your comp philosophy.
It's funny you say that. Like, that was such a novel concept to me until like last year, I want to say, which just seems crazy. But it also, I think, just talks to like, compensation has been around forever, but there's still so many different things that you can learn about ways that are doing it right for your business, right? Like, and again, that's what it comes back to. But I agree. You don't always have to like recognize the upper limit if it's actually going to constrain, again, finding or keeping the best people.
Absolutely. And, it's so counterintuitive to feel that, hey, our best performer who, nailed the interview and we brought them in at the upper range of the band, well, they're still performing like a superstar, but we're going to sort of cut their wings off because there's no business need for a promotion and they're already at the top of the band, so they're not going to get anything. How demotivating. I would hate that. Like, as an employee, I would be so offended by that. So,
and it kind of forces your people back toward the median from a performance perspective as well, right? Like, if you think about it, you've got this person who's kicking goals and then suddenly you're saying, well, we're not going to reward you like it. They're going to stop trying so hard, right? Because you're not incentivizing it.
I mean, I think so. It does. I do see organizations where, their values and their ethos may be more, not socialist, but maybe more, egalitarian. And that, that's totally fine if it's the ethos of the organization. Personally, though, as an HR director, I need to be able to stand by the comp philosophy and really believe in it and really believe I'm doing the best for my people. So it needs to be something that aligns with my values. And in our case, I would really struggle with putting a hard stop at an upper range and then not rewarding our best performers.
I think for those ones as well, like there's such a range of ways you can try and deal with it. Like whether you do close the gap a little bit with them from a base salary perspective, and then maybe the remainder is a lump sum. Like there's lots of different ways that you can be creative around trying to make sure that you're sticking within the sort of intent of your compensation philosophy, but not like limiting, the pay for performance philosophy element.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Another thing that we've been seeing a lot more of at Ravio is HR teams also playing a lot with offering non-monetary rewards. So it might be that, as you say, you go with a, spot bonus to reward performance or a big equity grant, something like that. But also things like sabbaticals have been coming up a lot more. Paid sabbatical, 2 weeks, a month. Fantastic. I would love that.
I was going to say arguably worth more than the money it costs the company as well. Like, I mean, totally. You only have to look at one or two studies to realize how valuable this is becoming more and more to people. I think, we're in a burnout epidemic in many ways ever since COVID, but also we're seeing a larger introduction of a younger sort of generation of the workforce where that sort of stuff is incredibly valuable to them. So yeah, I have also seen them used really well. I can't say I've seen them increased a lot. That's just my experience. But yeah, I can see how they'd be incredibly valuable rather than just going straight for cash.
Yeah, and it might be the case that, is there a scenario whereby it's worth saying, putting it to the person involved and saying, "Hey, here's what here are the options that we're thinking. What works best for you? Like we're open to all of these options of rewarding. Would you rather the cash in your pocket, or would you rather the sabbatical, whatever it might be?" I think that's great to have the option to choose.
Not to mention the goodwill I think it builds when you can tailor something to the individual. I mean, it obviously, it starts to introduce complexity when it comes to tracking and consistency and fairness, but it's also never been easier really with a lot of the tooling that you can get to be able to do something like that. But I think the impact it can have to say to someone, "Hey, you've had an incredible year, which of these many options would you potentially consider?" And to be able to have that choice would be amazing. I could only imagine, how I would have received something like that if I was an employee.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, nice one. So I've kind of talked about what's a good minimum viable product from a cycle design perspective. What do you think are some of the things people need to look for out the other side of it when they're going, okay, deep breath out, exhalation, done it, congratulations, pats on the back. It's probably arguably one of the hardest times of the year. What are some of the things that you think are worth looking at as, okay, let's do a little bit of a retro. What are the things that worked well? What didn't work well? Or maybe we should be looking ahead to next year's cycle.
Yeah, totally. So I think one thing that's helped me a lot in the past is doing a little bit of a focus group for the retro of the customers, our employees. So getting folks from different teams, different levels to do a little bit of a focus retro group. And it's really interesting to me to get their sense of, tell me what our comp philosophy is. How well can you explain it to me? So I think that's a great indication to see, has the message landed? Has the internal PR machine worked appropriately? Have I managed to what extent have we enabled our line managers to really educate their teams on what the comp philosophy is and how it works in relation to them in this particular comp cycle? And there's no way you can figure that out adequately without asking folks what their own experience has been. And, this is a reflection of my performance, I'm sure. I recognize that. But time and time again, I've had someone in the focus group say, "Oh, I never heard about this." And I'm like, oh my God. There I was thinking that everybody's bored of having me and other leaders sort of talk about the comp philosophy, and this person can't remember it, right? So I've not done a good enough job.
Saying that. No, I've definitely felt that. I've heard or read somewhere, and maybe it's totally made up, but it's like apparently you have to say something times, I think, before it's like actually, one person hears it themselves once. But I love in particular your point around asking them to kind of recite it back to you, because I don't know if this has been your experience as well, but I know certainly in a lot of compensation, retro surveys or something like that, we've asked questions like, how fair do you think your pay is? And I think it was only after doing it a couple of times where I was like, what does that even mean? Like, do people even know what fair is? And I think even understanding what the compensation philosophy is, that has to have happened first and foremost in my mind before someone can say whether or not it's fair, because you have to sort of define fair through that process. But why ask people whether or not they think it was a good, bad, or indifferent process if they never potentially understood how the process, was supposed to work from the get-go? That's a great little litmus test.
I'd add that I think when assessing fairness, people tend to think about they don't tend to think about what they're paid in absolute terms, but they think about it in relative terms to other colleagues. So I think also concluding the comp review and, whatever letter you send formalizing the change, if you can visualize to the employee, where they started and where they're at, like over time, but also where they sit in relation to other folks. I mean, it depends how big the organization is. If there's 2 people in your team, you can't really do that. But it can be a really good, if your comp philosophy is strong, and if you have conviction in your pay equity, that's a really strong card to play. The organization needs to be big enough, though.
Yeah, and of the right maturity. But no, I love the idea of that. I think it's such it's a clever play. And you're right. Like, at the end of the day, people are all going to speak to each other anyway. So I think being able to be as upfront as you can, to the extent that you can, is only going to play to your benefit. But amazing. Well, it's been short, but it's been incredibly beneficial. Thank you so much for running through this. So I guess for me, some of the big takeaways, which the first one I couldn't more agree with: get your data right, get it clean, get that scaffolding in place. When it comes to running that compensation cycle, build some of these basic rules around how you're going to treat people when it comes to certain pay outcomes. I love this idea of asking your people at the end of the process to recount their compensation philosophy to you, work out whether or not your PR efforts had actually been successful. And then last, but definitely an incredible one, is help people understand how their pay compares to others, if possible, but at the very least, kind of where they came from and where they went to. Those are some amazing takeaways. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's been great.
Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Foundation Series. Make sure to head over to our website to subscribe to the Foundation Series for monthly editions featuring future interviews on startup compensation. In each edition, we'll explore the different strategies, trends, and challenges faced by startups around the world. If you have a burning topic you'd like me to cover, or a standout guest that you want to hear from, drop me an email so I can dive deeper into the compensation topics that matter most to you. Join me next time as we continue to uncover the strategies and practices driving success in global tech startups around the world. Thanks for listening.